flow science, and the hidden cycle that's impacting your life right now, for better or for worse. This is why things sometimes feel harder than they should. So in the last couple of weeks, we've dug into the nitty-gritty of the foot-brain connection, the neurology, the mechanics of it all. Today, I thought we'd take a break from anatomy and deepen into one of my favorite topics, flow. There's never been a more important time to master flow. Without reliable access to this state, you simply can't keep up. Just like the human foot never evolved to wear shoes and walk on flat surfaces all day, the human brain never evolved to handle the flood of new information and the blinding rate of change that's become the norm in our hyper-connected, overstimulated, AI-driven world. It's overwhelming, and it's accelerating. Neuroscience has demonstrated that our conscious mind can only process roughly 40 bits of information per second. Yet we're all increasingly bombarded by way more than that almost every second of every day. A typical conversation is estimated to require about 60 bits per second to follow. That's why it's difficult to follow two conversations at once, let alone do it at the same time as walking or eating or anything else really. We quickly hit the bandwidth limit of conscious attention. On the other hand, our nervous system as a whole, including our subconscious, is estimated to process millions to billions of bits of information per second. That's a huge difference. Our conscious awareness simply can't keep up. That's why we need access to flow states. Flow is no longer a performance hack. It's a survival skill. In episode 8, we discussed the flow cycle and the 4 distinct stages that must occur in sequence in order to experience flow. Let's briefly review these stages as a quick refresher. But today I want to go deeper. There's a bigger picture here, an even deeper level of mastery available. This has got everything to do with how you run and grow your business. But it's so much more than just that. It's the key to optimizing your health. It's essential for the quality of your relationships. In fact, it impacts every domain in your life. They're all intimately connected. It's been said that we don't rise to the level of our greatness. We fall to the level of what we're willing to tolerate. You can't build a great business, but ignore your health. You can't build great relationships, but be constantly broke. It just doesn't work. Weakness in one area eventually drags down all the others. However, the flip side of that is also true. When you improve your relationships, your business tends to improve too. As stress drops away, health and energy increase. Instead of a vicious cycle, it becomes a virtuous cycle of improvement. One of the fastest, most efficient ways to activate this cycle is to build more flow into the different domains of your life. When that starts happening consistently, you create momentum, and momentum changes everything. You've felt this before. One place we see it is in sports. It's that moment when something shifts and suddenly the game is different. I used to feel it playing goalkeeper in soccer. My team would be winning, maybe up by a couple of goals, playing great, relaxed, everything going well. And then the shift happens. And suddenly my nervous system would kick into a state of readiness because I knew the shots were coming. We'd gone from building a lead to trying to defend that lead, and it was time to be ready for the counterattack. I'm sure you've felt it in business too. There are times when everything just seems to be working. The team's engaged, the phone keeps ringing, the books are full, we're hitting all the targets. And then there are times when it's not like that, when it feels like a slog, a grind, when nothing feels easy. The funny thing is, these two scenarios can look the same from the outside looking in, but they feel totally different. I remember a revelation I had around this years ago. I'd been through a period of extreme overwhelm, just crazy busyness. Everything felt hard. It was exhausting. Thankfully, over time that shifted, and I found myself in a much better place. My energy was better. I felt like I was gaining traction rather than simply spinning my wheels. I felt positive and purposeful again. And I remember looking back and thinking, man, I'm so glad I'm not as busy as I used to be. That was brutal. And then immediately on the heels of that thought came another one. I'm actually busier than ever. Now that was a complete shock because it was true. Objectively, I was busier, but it felt completely different. Calmer, easier, more productive, exciting even. That's the difference when you're operating in momentum. Momentum is the secret sauce to sustained peak performance. So how do we get there? First, let's briefly review the flow cycle. I know we've covered it before, but it's worth really locking this in so that you can practically implement it, so that you can live it every day. It's the building block of momentum. So like I said earlier, there are 4 stages: struggle, release, flow, and recovery. The first stage is struggle. It's the part that feels hard. It's the push to get out of the bed and get to the gym and punch out those first few reps before the endorphins kick in. Our brains resist this phase. Stress physiology kicks in, cortisol and noradrenaline spike. Suddenly every distraction feels urgent. This is actually the first trap. People avoid this phase because it doesn't feel good. And as a result, they short-circuit the cycle and they never get into flow. They keep advancing and retreating, never quite reaching the breakthrough point. This is one of the problems with our modern hyper-distractible environment. It keeps us locked in the struggle phase. Every time our phone dings or we get interrupted, it resets the cycle. We go right back to the start of the struggle phase again. It's a recipe for exhaustion, frustration, and burnout. If you take just one action after watching this video, turning off all the notifications on your phone and your computer would be a really great place to start. The other issue is that people misunderstand the struggle. Our brain is hardwired to avoid pain and conserve energy, so it will interpret the uncomfortable struggle as, I'm doing something wrong, I must be on the wrong track, I should give this up and focus on something else. Don't believe it when your mind tells you that. This phase is cognitively heavy. It's the prefrontal cortex preloading all the context and information that's going to be needed for effortless pattern recognition once you actually get into flow. The struggle is necessary. It's what activates your brain for the next phase. So after that, the next phase is release. Stress drops and neurochemistry shifts. Beta brainwaves shift to alpha. Sometimes this requires stepping away from the task briefly to let the unconscious work its magic. A walk, a light workout, a sauna. As you get better at reliably activating this cycle, the release phase can shorten to almost zero. It can be as quick as a bathroom break, a glass of water, a few deep breaths, and then bang, you're ready to go. Now you're into flow. The overthinking, overcritical mind drops away. Technically, frontal lobe activity drops and the default mode network quietens. Time dilates. We enter a state of deep presence. Neurochemistry shifts again, flooding the brain with dopamine, serotonin, anandamide, and endorphins. Theta and gamma brainwaves dominate, and performance goes through the roof. And it feels amazing. But we can't stay there forever. There's a hard cost to producing all those neurotransmitters, and recovery is required for the brain to relax and replenish itself. So this 4-stage cycle is the traditional map of flow, as described by author Stephen Kotler in his book, The Rise of Superman. It's the hour-by-hour progression that we experience when we access flow during our day, being identified across all human cultures as one of the most rewarding and fulfilling states we can experience. It's where I generally write my newsletters from, taking a process that used to take days and compressing it into hours. As chiropractors, we're lucky enough to have this built into our typical workday. All great adjusters I know operate from this place. It's one of the things that we all love about our job. I think it's one of the reasons that many chiropractors continue working well beyond typical retirement age. There's many benefits of our work, but regular, reliable access to flow is pretty high on the list. Although, as a doc, you may have never thought of it that way. I know for myself, I typically move through the struggle and release phase within the first minute of my first patient, or more often before I even arrive at the clinic. And then I'm in deep. Hours pass like minutes. I'm totally absorbed in each patient in front of me, recognizing hidden patterns, blending intuition and logic, and problem solving at a highly accelerated pace. I think it's one of the reasons why I often run late in my clinic. That sense of time dilation is real. You really just lose track of time. The consistent ability to drop into flow makes us better doctors and happier people. It feels good, but it doesn't necessarily build our business. I know getting great clinical results is the best marketing and practice building strategy on the planet. I believe that 100%. In fact, it's one of the core values of my practice. But there's more. There's a deeper cycle at play. When you learn to leverage this, everything in life just seems to click. This is what explains those periods I mentioned earlier, where whole weeks or months can feel like a grind, and at other times can feel almost effortless. I have to thank Rian Doris, founder of flowstate.com, for opening my eyes to this. When I first read his writing about it, it was like he was describing exactly what I'd experienced, what I'd even written about, but I didn't have the framework or the science to explain. After training 15,000 entrepreneurs and executives, Rian and his team discovered that there isn't just an hour-to-hour flow cycle as we've been talking about. There's also a week-to-week flow cycle. The hour-to-hour cycle describes our access to flow on any given day. The week-to-week cycle describes our overall performance, our momentum. It describes our flow proneness over time. And yes, you can train yourself to become more flow prone. It's kind of a superpower. The reason one good week often follows another, building and creating momentum. It's also the reason our bad weeks tend to do the same when things aren't going well. It's the explanation for the diagram I introduced in episode 8, which I call the peak and the pit. I described how my associates learning AK often go through this cycle, taking on new learning and developing a new level of proficiency, which is the peak, only to learn more and be thrown back into chaos, the pit, before integrating that and then reaching a new level of mastery. But it's not just individuals that experience this. Businesses do. Your business does. Families do. Whole economies do. I see practices experience this when they first implement anything new, like Better Balance Orthotics. The struggle phase in the beginning is uncomfortable. You're integrating new systems, new knowledge, new paradigms, and it can feel clunky. Communicating with patients can feel outside your comfort zone. It can feel like you don't have time or bandwidth for something new. Cognitively, it's taxing on our frontal lobes with heavy decision-making. And we're fighting the temptation to just take the easy way out and fall back into our old routines. Simply recognizing this as the struggle phase of the weekly flow cycle can make all the difference. It's normal. It's meant to feel uncomfortable. Remember, it's the gateway to release. And just like in the hour-to-hour flow cycle, some people give up here and they never experience the huge benefits for themselves, their patients, and their practice that lie just on the other side of that discomfort. For those that persist, breakthrough happens. Things quickly fall into place. They begin to feel normal. This is the release phase. Communication smooths out, processes become routine, decision-making lessens, effort decreases, and things become automatic. Here, there's a critical difference to the hourly flow cycle. In the week-to-week cycle, we don't drop into flow, we drop into momentum. In momentum, we experience more consistent periods of flow on a daily basis. Things feel easier. Results start stacking. When this happens in business, group flow occurs. Teamwork increases dramatically. Conflict drops. Everyone's on the same page. Group flow is such a fascinating topic. It's one I'll save for another day, but the studies on brainwave synchronization between Navy SEALs and between jazz musicians, pretty amazing. Increased flow states also start to show up across multiple domains of your life. For me, what that looks like is that my health routines are on point. My diet and my workouts feel easy and rewarding, pleasure rather than a chore. Family flow happens, times when I'm completely present and engaged playing with my boys. The voice in my head reminding me of the work I should be doing silences. They feel it. Positivity and gratitude increase. Focus shifts from what's not working to what is working. When we're in momentum, it feels like we're literally being pulled forwards towards the life and the results we want to create. At this point, we reach the final phase in the week-to-week flow cycle, integration. This is where we no longer have to think about the process. It just happens smoothly, routinely, almost effortlessly. We've built new habits. Cognitively, we've shifted the load from the frontal cortex back to deeper, older parts of the brain, like the striatum, which handles things on autopilot. This frees up our frontal cortex for thinking, planning, and in envisaging bigger goals. We've reached the peak. It's important to take a moment to breathe and celebrate here. If we're not conscious about it, it's really easy to just blow right through this phase and dive straight into the next pit. After all, this is the point where the next peak generally comes into view. In my Better Balance example, this is what integration looks like in my clinic. Better Balance Orthotics are integrated into every level of our patient journey. They're part of our initial consult, part of our report of findings, part of our care plan, part of our Better Results Faster workshop, and part of our ongoing patient education system. They're an integral part of our paradigm, a logical and necessary health strategy for the modern world. If you're a patient in my clinic and you regularly wear shoes and walk on flat surfaces, I guarantee you're going to understand the benefits of Better Balance Orthotics. Whether you choose to act on that understanding or not, of course, well, that's up to you. But we've done our part to create the conditions that set you up for optimal results. Of course, this isn't just about orthotics. When you start to recognize how the week-to-week flow cycle is playing out across all the multiple domains of your life, you gain the ability to smooth and accelerate the transitions from one phase to another, and life becomes way more fun. Before I go, one more thing. I'm thinking of creating a clinical tool to offer people as an incentive for subscribing to the Foot-Brain Connection. What I've got in mind is a 5-minute foot reset protocol that creates immediate postural changes. It's one that I use all the time in my clinic. My question is, does that sound like something you'd value? Something worth subscribing to yet another newsletter for? If so, comment protocol below and I'll send you the clinical reference card as soon as it's ready. Cheers. Have a great week.